Welcome to episode number 14 of the Eyes on Privacy podcast. And this week we're joined by Keith Watson and Mike Hill. We got the whole gang together again, I guess. I'm Preston Wiley. And we'll have Mike introduce the topic for this podcast.
Thank you, Preston. So really the big news during the past couple weeks has been TrueCrypt. On May 28th, TrueCrypt updated their website and basically stated that they posted a warning right across the top in big red letters saying, "Warning, using TrueCrypt is not secure as it may contain unfixed security issues." They further go on to say that the development of TrueCrypt has ended in May 2014 after Microsoft terminated support of Windows XP. Some initial reactions to this has been really in the security news a lot. Some initial reactions were, oh wow, did TrueCrypt get hacked? Why would their page say this about Windows XP? And they even have a message after it describing how to migrate from TrueCrypt to BitLocker for Windows, and then they have like a link that says to go to other operating systems, and that's really all that's been said by TrueCrypt themselves. And considering that the developers are anonymous, it's hard to kind of pin them down on exactly what their rationale was for doing this. So I thought this would be a really great discussion. As you mentioned, Preston, all three of us are actually available this week. I know that all of us have some varying experience with TrueCrypt, and there's just been a lot of speculation as far as what may have occurred. Things I've been seeing have implied that the developers essentially got to a point where they were just kind of just ready to end of life the product. They didn't want to support it anymore. And I guess didn't really want to hand it over to someone else, and just said, you know what, we're just going to put a message out there and say, people should stop using it. I should also mention that they removed all previous versions of TrueCrypt, and was it a version 2.0 they put out? 1.
It was 7.2.
7.2. Thank you. 7.2. They put out a 7.2. that would only allow you to decrypt your files, correct? Not allow you to encrypt them anymore. So it could be used as a migration tool, but they removed all the previous versions. So the version prior to that was 7.1a, and there are some sites, including security researcher Steve Gibson, where he's still hosting version 7.1a. And he happens to believe that there's nothing wrong with version 7.1a, and that the developers simply just did not want to continue to develop for this product, and believes it's safe to continue to use it as it is. So I thought that'd be a good starting point here. What do you guys think? Should we recommend to folks that they migrate away from TrueCrypt?
Well, the first thing that I kind of wanted to point out is with the page that the TrueCrypt developers, I guess, allegedly put up, I suppose, their alternative was BitLocker for Windows, and which is a kind of weird concept to consider that BitLocker would be their alternative, because TrueCrypt does so much more than what BitLocker does, and it seems odd to recommend a product like BitLocker, or I think they also recommended for Mac the built-in operating system stuff, and for Linux there's stuff for they essentially said, oh, use what's provided by your operating system to encrypt your software, and I find that kind of an odd recommendation, I guess, as an alternative, because really, it's not what I would consider a good recommendation. That's not what I would recommend to people, I don't think, to use BitLocker or the Mac encryption or whatever. Just because it kind of misses the whole idea behind going with a with a open source project where you can look at the source code, you can audit the source code, which is still happening now, versus a closed source project like Windows or Apple OS 10, where you can't do that. So I think it kind of misses the whole point on why people are using TrueCrypt in the first place, recommending these closed source solutions.
Yeah, that was a little odd, and there's a lot of other rumors about maybe the NSA got to them, and instead of continuing work on it, they kind of just tell everybody, don't use it, warn them away from it to indicate that maybe there's something sinister going on. Don't know if that's true, probably not. There's other issues that people have pointed out, saying maybe they just got bored with the thing. They hadn't really done any work on it in, I think, over a year. And so they just decided, you know what, don't want to do it anymore, so we're just going to end it instead of trying to support it moving forward. Some other thoughts were they encountered some tricky bug, and instead of trying to figure it out and fix it, they just said, yep, all done, not going to do any more with it. There's lots of rumors. The problem is that the developers of TrueCrypt are fairly anonymous. We don't really know who they are. And so that's been a big problem, is if you don't know who the actual developers are, you can't really go and talk to them and figure out what's going on. That was probably intentional so that, you know, if there were government agencies involved that wanted them to install backdoors into the software, they would have a little more difficult time trying to track down who the authors of the software were. That doesn't help us now. There's also some issues with the licensing. It has a unique open source license that basically said that the TrueCrypt team was the only one allowed to distribute the software. You could look at it, but you couldn't actually create new derivatives of it. But when your developer team is anonymous, who's going to sue you in court when you make copies of the source code and make corrections to bugs and all that sort of issues? So there's a lot of questions here and not a lot of answers. The audit, as Preston mentioned, they didn't find anything significantly wrong. No backdoors were discovered in the first part of the audit, and the audit continues to look at other issues with the source code as well. So I think we're going to see TrueCrypt live on unless this audit reveals something significant is actually there. But until that's completed, we don't know. I know that the person running the audit, I believe his name is David Green, if I remember, or Matthew Green, sorry. He says, I got money in the bank ready to spend on the audit, so we're going to go forward with it. So they're going to continue on and continue to audit it. And some other people most likely will probably pick up software development here. So while TrueCrypt version 7.1a may have ended, I think TrueCrypt will live on in some other way. So that remains to be seen, though.
Yeah, well, and that raises a good question. As Preston mentioned already, BitLocker is not really a good alternative. And like for me, I really like using TrueCrypt because I go between the multiple operating system environments. Windows 7, Mac OS 10. It allowed me to kind of have these encrypted files on a network drive, and I could access them from multiple machines, multiple different operating systems, and there's really not that many good alternatives. I have seen some forks of TrueCrypt, but I've also seen some comments that says, well, if you trust a fork of TrueCrypt, why not just trust the TrueCrypt source code itself? So I guess personally where I'm at with it is I used TrueCrypt for both kind of business and personal files, and for my personal files I also used Dropbox. So I went ahead and shifted over to Boxcryptor because it eliminated that issue you already described, Keith, in that having a large container file in Dropbox being accessed from multiple machines could cause corruption. Boxcryptor eliminates that issue, integrates really well with Dropbox. For the other places I'm using TrueCrypt, though, I haven't moved on to anything else yet because no good alternative. I haven't discovered a good alternative yet, and I'm not entirely convinced that there's anything wrong with the code at this point. Just because the developers say it may, essentially they're saying it may not be secure because we're not updating it, and it's like, well, okay, but until we know more, should we really panic and shift away from it? I think personally I would like to shift away from it in the future, and I agree. I think TrueCrypt's going to live on in some way. Somebody's going to pick this up. Others are going to fork off of it because, as you mentioned already, the developers have strived to stay anonymous, and they're not going to, I think, come out of cover if somebody forks it off and makes new versions of this and continues to allow it to live on. I don't think they're going to come out of hiding and sue them. I think they're just going to let it happen.
Well, Keith was talking about the licensing issue, and I completely agree with him that if the developers wish to remain anonymous, there is absolutely no way for them to enforce the license of not being able to distribute it or fork it or whatever. I think that's an impossible task unless the developers are willing to come out of the woodwork and say, hey, it's us, and we don't want TrueCrypt to continue or whatever. That's the only way that would happen. And there's actually at least one fork that I know of, and I know there was another piece of software that was initially compatible with TrueCrypt but has moved kind of away from the compatibility thing, and I'm not sure if it was a direct fork. I think it might have been a rewritten code base that was somewhat based around the idea of TrueCrypt. I can't remember what Mike could tell you the one of the direct fork. I think it was something crypt.
Veracrypt.
There's Veracrypt, and then I tested out a software called DiskCryptor, which has some of the functionality of TrueCrypt. It can encrypt. It enables full disk encryption. It doesn't support creating encrypted containers and some of the other and the hidden volumes and stuff like that TrueCrypt supported, but it did full disk encryption, and it supported the use of key files and things like that TrueCrypt supported as well, and the interface was somewhat similar but was different. Was it Veracrypt? That one was amazingly similar in look to TrueCrypt. It looked like it was a direct fork, and I guess it's not compatible with TrueCrypt anymore either because they've actually been actively developing it and probably have seen some flaws with the way TrueCrypt did things and maybe did things a little bit better. But both of this pieces of software that I'm talking about are open source, and you can get the source code to both of them and look at them. So there are actually alternatives out there, but and I think Mike pointed out, if you're going to trust an alternative that was forked from TrueCrypt, why not trust TrueCrypt itself? Because if there's something wrong with TrueCrypt, you have no idea when it was introduced into the software. So is a fork of TrueCrypt even any better than just trusting TrueCrypt itself?
Well, it's true of any type of open source. I mean, sure, you have the source code, but do you personally go and review the code, and do you understand what you're looking at is always a good question. I think part of what they were doing with the audit is, even though we have the code, people haven't really reviewed it well enough to know if there were backdoors, because with crypto, it's possible to insert backdoors or weaken the encryption in subtle ways that the average developer code auditor may not be able to detect. And so the first level of audit of the TrueCrypt source code basically said there's no obvious backdoor. The second part of the audit is to go look at the more subtle nature of encryption software to look for if there are cases of weakening the encryption. And so we'll see how that goes. But again, just because it's open source software doesn't necessarily mean that there aren't bugs in it. I mean, look at OpenSSL. It had a bug that was pretty significant with Heartbleed that existed for over 2 years before anybody discovered it. So even the best, or depending on how you look at it, even the most commonly used encryption software, security software, can still have bugs in it, and TrueCrypt's no exception to that rule. But hopefully, unlike other things like OpenSSL, it'll get a little more attention, and some folks will actually do a serious review of it. Hopefully, we'll continue on with seeing development. So we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I just wish that the TrueCrypt developers, when they updated their site, would have just made some kind of statement as to why we should not see it as secure anymore. Is this just simply a matter of, we've thrown a lot of theories out here, and the one they probably couldn't say anything about at all, and I don't think this one's is likely, but if it really was the NSA, they could just say, hey, we're kind of having our hand forced and we're just going to stop. Or if they tired out of this, just say that. Just say, hey, we've had a good run. We initially did this back when there wasn't many good built-in encryption software. We now feel that the operating systems come with suitable encryption software, and we no longer want to support this. Thank you for all the support through the years, but we're done. Take the software at your at your risk, because we're not updating it anymore. But instead they really put, not to use a pun, but they put a very cryptic message on their site. They say using it is not secure. They say it's not secure because it may contain unfixed security issues. And it's like, well, it may not be secure then, depending upon if it contains security issues. If it contains security issues, then it's not secure. But if it doesn't contain security issues, is it secure then? So, yeah. Like I said, I will be seeking out alternatives as time goes on. But I also wanted to see how things play out, because a lot of folks are covering this and are interested in seeing what happens with TrueCrypt. So I think time will tell, and when that next phase of the audit gets completed, I think that'll tell us a lot. And if it gets through that, then I think a lot of people are going to keep on using version 7.1a.
Well, until they're going to use something with Windows 8 support.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of on the fence about the whole thing, and I'm kind of waiting for the audit to finish and see what, if there's anything going on or not. I don't personally, I don't think they're going to find anything, but I just it is so odd, and that's why it's been discussed so much in length by a lot of people, and it's probably one of the odder ways they could have ended the project that I can think of. Honestly, I mean, just a statement saying we're done. We're not going to develop this software anymore. Would have been a lot more refreshing than this somewhat cryptic message on, you shouldn't use it. It's not. It may not be secure. And another thing that I heard, and it was that was pointed out, which is relevant, is that 7.2 was no trivial task either. That this was not something that just happened in an instant. This was something that happened. They had to actually do a significant amount of development to get this version 7.2 out. So this was not something that was just kind of done on a whim. This was something that was done, was planned, at least by someone, maybe a developer. But this isn't something that just kind of was a whim, we're done type thing. This is something that they had to do a significant amount of development in order to get out the door. So I mean, that's something to think about as well. Is that
it's interesting too, because not only was it a significant amount of development, but it also was an easy way to so they didn't leave any of their customers sort of stranded, and that also feeds into the theories. Why why not? If you're just done and you're tired and you don't want to do any more, why not just say I'm done? If you can get version 7.1a, great. That's what you had. Excellent. Otherwise, there's nothing else here to download. We're done. We're taking all the software down. But why make that effort? Why make a version that essentially lets you decrypt the files that were encrypted with TrueCrypt, but not have the full functionality otherwise? It's just so odd because there's just no real explanation as to why you would end it that way. Without some that lends itself to saying, like you said, it was very well thought out, and hey, we're just done, and here's our final product is a way so you don't get stuck. If you've encrypted files with TrueCrypt, our final version will still allow you to decrypt those files. But other than that, we're not supporting any other software. Thanks for the ride. But there was nothing like that. It's just a real cryptic message, and here's 7.2, and it doesn't do hardly anything.
Yeah, and if we're looking for alternatives, as we talked about, I mean, they list a couple OS-specific ones, but really there's nothing, cross-system compatible yet that stands out as a good replacement for TrueCrypt. So if you want suggestions, I don't know that we have any.
Well, as Mike mentioned, he uses Boxcryptor. That's not a replacement. I mean, it doesn't have the same functionality. It's completely different in what it does, but it does encrypt your files. If you want the kind of encrypted container aspect of TrueCrypt, it somewhat accomplishes that task. So I mean, that's you can get bits and pieces of TrueCryptor here and here and here, but you TrueCrypt, but you can't really get them all in one package. You can find, well, I need the full drive encryption. Okay, I can get it here. I want this, I can get it here. I want this, I can get it here. But it's hard to find just one package that replaces TrueCrypt.
The one part you're not going to get though is plausible deniability.
Right, and that's
probably the most important feature for a lot of people.
Yeah, that's the one thing that
container hidden within another container, and without TrueCrypt, I don't know of anything else that does something like that. And
right,
that's
I don't either.
Right there.
I don't either, and that's something that there's, as far as I know, there's nothing out there that is at least somewhat popular that has that functionality. So. Yeah.
Yeah, and until a suitable replacement comes along, as long as that audit comes back, the next phase of the audit comes back clean, I think you're going to see people continue to use TrueCrypt.
Right, because as we said, they really don't have any other option if that's what they want. So if you need that hidden volume / plausible deniability thing, then you really have to stick with TrueCrypt and just hope that it's secure. Really, is your only option right now.
But I think someone's going to take it off and run with it. I think there's enough demand out there that someone's going to do it. A group's going to pick it up and say, we're going to take this over. We're going to run with it. And as long as they don't get sued by the TrueCrypt developers, which I don't think they will, because the TrueCrypt developers don't want their identities to be known. Then you're gonna see this thing evolve. It'll take some time, but I would expect in the coming years there's going to be an evolution of what was TrueCrypt. I don't know if they'll have to call it something else, TrueCrypt Plus or whatever, TrueCrypt 8 for.
They'll probably just rename it.
Rename it. Probably Open TrueCrypt.
Open TrueCrypt. Well, yeah, whatever. But I imagine that's what'll happen, and I think like I said, as long as no bad information comes out regarding TrueCrypt. I mean, the developers could still come back out and say, okay, we tried to tell you guys nicely, we tried to be discreet, but you really shouldn't use this software, and here's an indication of why. Unless something like that happens, or unless the audit finds something, I think there's still a fair number of people that trust this software, and it provides things that no other software provides. So, in the meantime, I think people will use it, and I think people will take up what was there and develop new versions of it. That's my theory.
I'll admit. I'll admit that I've never used any of those plausible deniability features like hidden volumes and stuff like that. So that's not really what I'm using it for. But I can see it as a feature that people would want, especially if you're traveling to certain places where encryption is kind of not not tolerated as well, and you get to an airport where they say, "Oh, you have an encrypted thing, unencrypt it for us so we can see what's in it." And in that case, I can see it as a very valuable tool. But I've never used it. I don't go to places like that. So
I'll point out one ringing endorsement, and that's from the NSA Public Relations Twitter account, and I'll read it verbatim. TrueCrypt is fine. Please continue using for all secret documents. So there you go. So the NSA gives it a thumbs up. So we're good.
Oh wow, wow. Okay.
It's a parody site, by the way.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, on somewhat on that topic. I mean, we've heard a lot. I've heard things from the FBI, I think, and police agencies that have said they struggle with when people use TrueCrypt, and TrueCrypt is very much a thorn in their side as far as getting information out of getting evidence and stuff from people. So there has been some PR, and you believe it if you want, believe it or not. You can believe it or you cannot believe it. There's been some press from law enforcement agencies that TrueCrypt essentially does hinder them. So
well, there's a couple court cases listed in the Wikipedia page for TrueCrypt that talk about instances in which somebody was arrested for something and they had a TrueCrypt drive and they had no luck getting past it. So that's court cases, and there's at least three court cases, I believe, in which that was actually stated stated as evidence in court. You used it, you couldn't get access to it. So.
Right. So it has been used and has been a hindrance to law enforcement agencies. So I guess you can say, well, obviously they don't have a backdoor for it. So I don't think the NSA gives out their backdoors to everybody, though. So the NSA kind of keeps them, I think, in house and only uses them for their own means.
Right.
All right. Well,
so basically the audit starts this month, and we should wrap up by September. So we'll hear more then.
Yeah, we'll hear more then, and if anything interesting comes out, we can definitely talk about it on another episode. And we're going to post probably quite a bit of links with this podcast with various articles, and I believe we're going to have at least one link to a repository that has the previous version of TrueCrypt 7.1a, because they chose to take it down, essentially delete everything that wasn't 7.2 from their site, so you couldn't get 7.1a, but it is available in various locations. So, anybody else have anything else to add to the conversation? No? All right. Well, thank you to Keith Watson and Mike Hill. I'm Preston Wiley, and keep your eyes on privacy.